In the final weeks of 2020, an employee at one of the world's most elite cybersecurity firms looked down at his phone. A routine notification was asking him to approve a login to his corporate account. He had not requested it. Assuming it was an error or a low-level phishing attempt, he ignored it. But seconds later, the login succeeded anyway. Someone invisible had just bypassed the defenses of FireEye, a company paid to protect the Fortune 500, critical infrastructure, and global intelligence agencies. As security engineers tore their own network apart, hunting for the intruder, they uncovered a terrifying reality. They were not the primary target. The attacker was not trying to destroy them. FireEye was merely collateral damage in an invisible web that had already compromised the highest levels of the United States government. The security team at FireEye had mobilized immediately after that unauthorized login. They isolated the affected account and pulled the connection logs. They discovered that a new device had been secretly registered to the employee's multi-factor authentication profile. That was how the attacker had approved the login. But finding the unauthorized device was only the beginning of the nightmare. The investigators traced the intruder's movements backward, deep into their own infrastructure. The trail led away from their perimeter defenses, bypassing all the firewalls, and stopped at a server running a legitimate, widely used software platform called Orion. Manufactured by a company named SolarWinds, Orion was an IT monitoring tool. It required deep administrative privileges to see and touch almost everything inside a corporate network. The FireEye investigators pulled the Orion software apart line by line. Hidden deep inside a dynamic link library file, buried under layers of legitimate programming, they found a backdoor. It was a highly sophisticated piece of malicious code, but it was the digital signature attached to the file that stopped the investigators cold. The malicious code had not been injected by a hacker breaking into FireEye's server. The code was digitally signed by SolarWinds itself. It had been delivered directly through an official, verified, secure software update. If FireEye had downloaded the poisoned update, then everyone else using SolarWinds Orion had likely downloaded it too. And almost everyone used SolarWinds. The digital trail pointed to the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. Their objective was total information dominance over the United States government. They wanted access to the Department of Defense, the State Department, the Treasury, and the Department of Homeland Security. But the SVR knew that a direct frontal assault against federal agencies would trigger massive alarms. The perimeter defenses of American intelligence are monitored constantly. A direct attack would burn their hacking tools and invite immediate retaliation. So, the Russian operators decided not to break down the front doors of the government. They would simply compromise the company that manufactured the locks. SolarWinds provided network management software to more than 300,000 customers worldwide. Their client list included all 5 branches of the U.S. military, the Pentagon, the National Security Agency, and the Office of the President of the United States. Sometime in early 2019, Russian intelligence operators quietly breached the corporate network of SolarWinds. They did not encrypt databases or demand a ransom. They moved with absolute silence, searching for the heart of the company, the build environment. This was the central nervous system where raw source code was compiled into the executable programs shipped to customers. But the attackers faced an immediate operational problem. How do you inject malware into a flagship software product without the company's own developers noticing the strange code? Their solution was a masterpiece of malicious engineering. The attackers wrote a deployment mechanism later named Sunspot. They injected Sunspot into the build server and instructed it to remain entirely dormant. It was programmed to wake up only when it detected that the Orion software was actively being compiled. In that brief, automated window, Sunspot silently inserted a backdoor, named Sunburst, into the source code. The compilation finished, creating the final poisoned Orion update. Then, before any human developer could review the logs, Sunspot cleaned up after itself, removing the malicious code from the source files and restoring everything to its original state. It was an automated, self-cleaning injection system. Between March and June of 2020, SolarWinds pushed this routine software update to its customers. Because it came from official servers and carried a valid cryptographic signature, no antivirus software flagged it. No firewall blocked it. Approximately 18,000 organizations clicked download. The Russian operators were inside. But now they faced a second massive obstacle. Elite organizations do not simply install new software on live networks. They place it in an isolated testing environment called a sandbox to observe it for malicious behavior. To beat the sandbox, the attackers programmed the Sunburst backdoor to do absolutely nothing. For 12 to 14 days after being installed, the malware slept. By the time it finally woke up, the testing window had passed, and the software was actively running on the live network. But a backdoor is useless if it cannot communicate with the attackers. This presented a third major problem. The United States government spends billions of dollars on a defense system called Einstein, designed to detect malicious traffic. Furthermore, the National Security Agency operates a vast surveillance apparatus to track foreign hackers. If the malware inside a federal agency called home to a server in Moscow, it would be caught immediately. To solve this, the attackers disguised their communications to look exactly like a legitimate protocol called the Orion Improvement Program. To a security analyst watching the network traffic, it simply looked like the SolarWinds software was performing a routine diagnostic check. To evade the NSA, the attackers rented virtual private servers located inside the United States, utilizing domestic cloud providers like Amazon Web Services. When the malware called home, the traffic traveled from an American government building to an American commercial server. The NSA, legally prohibited from monitoring domestic internet traffic, was completely blind. The Einstein system failed to detect it because the traffic appeared to be legitimate diagnostics heading to a local address. Through this hidden channel, the malware signaled Moscow. The SVR now possessed a list of 18,000 compromised networks, but they did not attack all of them. Actively exploiting 18,000 networks would create too much noise. They were conducting a sniper operation, not a carpet bombing. They filtered the list. They discarded ordinary businesses and selected only the crown jewels: the Treasury, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Energy. For these selected targets, the SVR operators sent commands back through the backdoor, instructing Sunburst to deploy a secondary, highly advanced payload called Teardrop. Teardrop was a memory-only tool. It did not write itself to the hard drive, making it virtually invisible to traditional antivirus scans. Now, the Russian operators had a permanent, interactive foothold inside the target networks. But to read classified emails and internal documents, they had to bypass the final barrier: multi-factor authentication. They needed user credentials. Instead of guessing the passwords of government officials, the attackers solved this final problem by targeting the server that managed the network's identity provider. Once there, they stole the digital certificate used to sign security tokens. By possessing the signing certificate, the attackers could forge their own digital passports. They could create a mathematically perfect, valid token identifying them as the Secretary of Homeland Security or a top general. The network did not see an unauthorized hacker trying to force their way in. The network saw a highly privileged executive presenting a flawless cryptographic passport. This was the ultimate compromise. By forging these tokens, the attackers bypassed multi-factor authentication completely. For 9 months, throughout the entirety of 2020, the Russian intelligence operators roamed freely through the highest levels of the United States government. They read internal communications, monitored cybersecurity policy, and watched the defense agencies of the nation debate their next moves. They had established complete information dominance. They had executed the perfect espionage operation, and it would have remained a secret for much longer if they had not made one crucial miscalculation. They targeted the red team hacking tools at FireEye. When FireEye's investigation finally uncovered the digitally signed backdoor inside the SolarWinds update, the CEO of FireEye made a critical decision. He did not attempt to quietly patch the vulnerability and hide the breach. He picked up the phone and called the United States government. Then, in December 2020, FireEye went public. The realization hit Washington like an earthquake. The initial notification of a massive federal breach did not come from the NSA. It did not come from Cyber Command. It came from a private company that had been hacked. Emergency meetings were convened at the White House. Civilian federal agencies were ordered to immediately disconnect or power down their SolarWinds Orion servers. IT administrators across the world scrambled to sever their networks. As investigators poured into the affected agencies, the true scale of the disaster materialized. Evicting the attackers was a monumental task. Because the operators had stolen the cryptographic keys that governed identity, simply changing passwords was useless. Organizations had to completely rebuild their identity management infrastructure from the ground up. They had to assume that any device connected to the network during the 9-month infection window was compromised. The cleanup effort cost billions of dollars and took months of grueling forensic work. The SolarWinds hack forever changed how the world understood digital security. It shattered the illusion that a strong perimeter was enough to stop an advanced adversary. The defenders had built massive walls, deployed advanced threat detection, and mandated complex authentication protocols. But the attackers had simply bypassed the walls by hiding inside the very tools the defenders used to manage the fortress. The Russian operators did not destroy data. They did not shut down power grids or erase financial records. Their objective was silent, persistent, total surveillance. They proved that trust itself is the ultimate vulnerability. They turned a routine software update into a weapon of mass espionage, executing an operation of such staggering scale and sophistication that it remained entirely invisible until a single employee looked at his phone, saw a login he did not request, and refused to let it go. If there's an extraordinary true story you'd love to hear on this channel, tell us about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this one, leave a like, join the channel, and stay with us for more incredible true stories.